Welcome to Guest of the Year. I'm the host. My name's Mike. This week's guest setlist curator is Ed Martin, who runs 31 Days of Dead, a popular biannual series with 31 consecutive days of curated Grateful Dead tracks and sequences, complete with thoughtful analysis. Ed keeps the fun going all year on his Instagram, at 31 Days of Dead, which is linked in the show notes. Ed also has two fantastic Connecticut-based Grateful Dead tribute bands, Phunk Your Face Band and Bear's Choice. Welcome, Ed.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. It's going to be fun.
This week's prize pack provider is JyArz, spelled JyArz. JyArz are simple, portable, reusable, recyclable, glass-lined, waterproof travel containers. JyArz can be used to store and transport your personal care products like pills, creams, oils, shampoos, medicinal herbs, homeopathic remedies, and much more. All the JyArz links are in the show notes. Thanks so much, Becker and Aldo. All right, here's how the game works. We'll play the first part of a Grateful Dead live track, and each contestant will use the messaging system to silently guess which year the performance is from. Contestants who are all in a video conference together can message in their guesses at any time during the clip or in the 10 seconds after it concludes. Whoever is furthest from the correct year is eliminated. The last two Deadheads standing will hear 3 tracks, and whoever is closest to the correct years in aggregate wins. We've got our 3-time returning champ Brett here with us, and we'll meet the rest of the Deadheads in a moment. But first, without further ado, the Grateful Dead. All right, the guesses are in. It was Cold Rain and Snow at MSG on October 12th, 1983. That was a Matrix with help from Dave Usborne. Ed, tell us about that Cold Rain and Snow.
Okay, well, first, this pick was from my 2012 31 Days of Dead edition from December of 2012. As you said, this is the Cold Rain and Snow is the opener, the day after the big St. Stephen bust out at the Garden. And I like this Cold Rain and Snow because it has a very catchy, syncopated, repeating riff that Jerry does toward the end. And so that was the primary reason why I picked that.
Your most recent 31 Days of Dead was all tapers. Could you tell us about how that came up?
That was really fun. When it gets to be August, September, I have to start thinking about what my project will be in December. It takes a little bit of planning. And I knew that in 1984, that was when the Dead started the taping section in October of 84 at the Berkeley Community Theater. And so I knew it was going to be the 40th anniversary coming up, and I figured that might be a good theme to use for my project. So this past December, all of my picks were audience-based recordings.
And when you're preparing those, do you get like 100 and winnow them down, or you just like be very picky about which ones you select to drag over to the spreadsheet?
Yeah, it's usually a brainstorming thing, and I have to whittle it down. And sometimes, even when I'm in December, I make last-minute edits. Yeah, it's usually a huge brainstorming thing, and then I'm just constantly whittling it down to those 31 picks, 31 days.
Is that satisfying or agonizing?
It's very satisfying.
Right on. Right on. Okay. Brett is the only one who got it exactly. Brett is 29 from Holland, Pennsylvania. He's our 3-time returning champ, and he's on to the next round. Brett, 83. Another nice pull.
Thanks. Basically, I was hearing Brent there. I knew immediately it was Brent era. And I kind of spent the rest of the time thinking about Jerry's voice. I'm like, it was a kind of a heavy, like you said, audience recording in there. So it made it a little tougher to hear. And so I was thinking there was a chance it was like 85 when Jerry's voice was starting to get better again, like late in the year. But I thought it sounded maybe a little bit less raggedy.
Way to go, Brett. You're on the next round. Next closest and also on the next round was Jacob, who guessed 87. Jacob is 26 from Gulfport, Mississippi. Nice poll, Jacob. You're on the next round. What'd you hear?
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, similar, I heard Brent. So I knew it was 80s. I'm not great at the 80s personally, so I kind of took a little bit of shot in the dark. It had high energy. So yeah, it just kind of seemed like maybe a little bit later 80s, but I wasn't totally sure. So it was kind of just, we'll see what happens.
Deech is also on the next round because he guessed 88 because Tim guessed 89. Deech is 53 from Woodstock. Tell us about 88.
Well, similar to Brent, I definitely heard, Brent right away, and it was a little bit scratchy. The audio wasn't as clean as some of the other audio that I've heard, to make it a little bit easier, but kind of brought me back to my original days of seeing the Dead. 86 was my first show, so 88 was right in that same era, and it almost kind of just like the feel of that time kind of stood out. So I figured 87. I was going to say 87. 88, 83 took me for a little surprise, but again, I think it was the recording. It was a little scratchy.
Yeah, and you were here in a room that they played a lot in that later time period too.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Well, Tim guessed 89. He is 44 from Berkeley, California. Talk to us, Tim.
Yeah, wow. I'm definitely surprised that it was that early. I obviously, as everybody said, Brent. To me, Brent's organ, just the tone of it sounded later, but it's probably that audience recording and that good room sound. And Jerry's voice, obviously, as I think Brett mentioned, to me sounded like it was an 84, 85 voice. And I did have a fleeting moment of like, is it early 80s? No. I also liked some of the drum tone. Again, I think that's probably the room and the audience recording, and that tipped me towards that later 80s sound. So yeah, I can't believe I was 6 years off, but I guess I wasn't the only one that was fooled by a bit. That was a great pick, Ed. Thank you.
Tim, how did you get into the Dead?
When I started like in high school, I went to all boys Jesuit high school, and so all the guys, older guys were into rock music, first of all, which was not really what we were listening to in 1992 when I was in 8th grade. A lot of like West Coast rap. But then we started getting into music with guitars and got way into the Dead. We were really into the Dead and trading tapes before I even saw them. We kind of went all in, me and a few of my buddies. And then I grew up in St. Louis, and the Dead came back in 94. I was 15. And I had to go on family vacation. I couldn't go. The next year they came back, 95, and I did go. I got the 2 shows before Chicago, so 2 of the last 4. I saw Fish in June, and 3 weeks later saw my only 2 Dead shows, and it was all downhill from there. It's like whatever. It was July 95. I have no illusions about what I saw, but it was incredible to have seen it. I had a friend who couldn't go to those shows. He got grounded right before those shows. And to this day, we're like almost 30 years later, he's just like, I can't believe it. So yeah, no, it was a big deal. I love Fish, saw him a lot, still see him, but the Dead is really first love and what I listen to every day.
How do you listen to them?
So I'm kind of a hi-fi stereo nerd, so I like to sit in the sweet spot in my living room, get the tube amp warmed up. I've got pretty nice vinyl setup, so I do like listening to them on record. But I listen to just a ton of shows, but from the hard drive and Dave's picks, and just mostly straight shows all the way through. Rarely skip a song or bounce around. I really like to just get all the way into it and have the context for the whole thing, even if it's a little slow to start in the first set or the beginning of the second set's a little chunky. To me, it gives that context to the later great jam, right? And the great jam is awesome on its own, but I like the whole context.
So for those who don't know, I randomly approached him outside a Terrapin event in Novato, California, and played a New Year's Eve 1984 show. And Tim called, "Oh, is that New Year's Eve 1984 Shakedown?" How has your life changed since that incredible poll?
Yeah, that was really funny. I definitely have gotten recognized. My friend Brian that was with me on that, who told the hilarious story about the dead class he was taking at Santa Cruz. He and I both, we see a lot of shows together, and he and I both get recognized. And yeah, it's pretty funny. Definitely changed my life, Mike. I really appreciate it.
I thought it might have.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thank you, man. I really appreciate it, Mike. Good to meet you all. Good luck. I'll be listening in.
Good stuff, Tim. Thanks again, man. Deets, Jacob, and Brett go on to the next round. Ed's got another track. Let's hear it. The guesses are in. It was Little Red Rooster at MSG, again, on September 24th, 1988. Ed, tell us about that Little Red Rooster.
This version comes from the Rainforest Benefit. It was show number 9 of 9 of the MSG run. I personally attended, I think, about 7 of those shows. I can't remember exactly, but living in New York was very easy to, get to Madison Square Garden. I did not attend the Rainforest Benefit. The tickets were double what they usually are because it was a benefit, and I wanted to tape it, which I did off of the local radio station WNEW here in New York. I also included this version of Red Rooster in my 2010 31 Days of Dead edition. It was the first year that I did the series. Brent is just, his vocals are just crazy good here. The Henhouse verses with the expletives and all. And then just, takes it away on the B3 organ and just owns it like a boss, like he usually does.
So that first 31 Days of Dead, what was its form? How did you do it? And what inspired you to do it? And why 31 days?
Okay, all good questions. So that was the first year that the Dead ran their 30 Days of Dead in November. And as they were doing it, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. It's like, I think I could do that too. I was very heavily involved in the tape trading scene in the 80s. And I was constantly making tapes for people, making mixes, turning people on. And this was like an extension of that, of kind of sharing music that I discovered with other people. And so initially it started with just, a small circle of friends. And I was sending daily emails to a group of people. And that kind of grew from there. My friends were asking, well, this is cool. Can I add, my friend to this? And then their friends were asking to be added to it. And so there were a lot of people on this email chain I didn't even know anymore. And it started getting really big. And then eventually one of the guys on the email distribution, Mason is his name. He runs the From the Lot Instagram account. He said, you should really bring this to Instagram. And I did, beginning in 2017, and that's how long I've been running the account for. And every December, I still, do this series of, I do a pick every day of the month, much like the Dead do. Just kind of keep the music flowing. So it's not just November; it's November and December now.
That's awesome. Mason's the one. Well, Mason's done a lot for Guest of the Year. He's like promoted the shit out of it for very early on when no one listened to it. And
he's such a great guy.
Yeah, but he also put me on your email chain. I leave like the wiser heads to talk. I kind of just stand in the back and listen. But it's so cool, and the Instagram is great too. You do all these clips and all these recs, and yeah, it's a real pleasure to follow along. The closest here was Brett. He guessed 87. Why 87, Brett?
I kind of heard that big sound, like that big late 80s sort of sound. But then with Brent's, vulgarity in his lyrics there, I thought I remembered that being in somewhere in that 87, I guess 88 too, time frame. So I figured it wasn't any later than that because obviously it was still Brent. And I didn't think it had sort of like the arena sound, that big arena sound. I don't think earlier in the 80s had that big arena sound.
Awesome. Jacob and Deech are both on the next round because they both guessed 86. So everyone's moving on. Jacob, why 86?
It was kind of coming in like in and out of each ear a little bit through the headphones. So, I heard Brent, obviously, I knew it was 80s, and I was thinking it was mid to late 80s, but because it was kind of panning through each ear, I couldn't tell if that was because of the recording or just my headphones, or if maybe Dan Healy was getting crazy. I knew sometimes he liked to have a little fun like that. So I almost guessed 87 again, but since I did that last time, I wanted to jump a little bit.
Deech also guessed 86. Tell us, Deech.
It's a tough one with Brent because he's pretty consistent sound with from 86 to 88.
That's very
it's
true.
A tough one. If there was a little Jerry in there, I would have been like, oh, that's definitely 88. But with Brent, it's tough.
Well, I love when everyone moves on, and that's what happened. Let's hear the next track. Franklin's Tower at the Forum in Inglewood, California on June 4th, 1977. That tape is courtesy of Bob Mankey and Derek McCabe. Ed, tell us about that Franklin's Tower.
Well, first, this comes from my most recent 31 Days of Dead series in December of 2023. The theme was to thank a taper. This particular one, in a year that is chock full of Betty boards, this is a rare audience tape from 1977. It sounds very different from what we're accustomed to hearing, especially, May of 77. And that's primarily why I chose it. This is a great show with one of the more unique plane sandwiches out there. And the Franklins into space, into China Doll is really sweet. And also, it's during a time when the band was playing Help Slip Franklins. This is a rare instance where they just played Franklin's without those two songs. I don't think a board even exists in the vault for this show.
Always disappoints
Excellent
me.
pick.
I go back and check every once in a while. I'm like, still not there.
Brett and Jacob both got it exactly 77, and Deech guessed 76. Jacob, tell us about your guess, 77. You're on to the finals.
Jerry's guitar tone stood out pretty distinctly to me. I think that was the Travis Beam era. And so that is, pretty good indicator of 77 to me. And then I heard it was like a couple seconds, almost like a cowbell or something, just like a little ding, ding, ding. And that always reminds me of the Scarlet Begonias from the Cornell show. And so it just reminds me of 77. So I kind of just, put two and two together. Wasn't totally sure, thought maybe it could be 76 or 78. But yeah, that's pretty much what kind of clued me in there.
Nice. Brett, you seem to know what Jacob was talking about immediately. You guys 77 are also on the finals, one step closer to your four-peat. What were you agreeing with?
Oh, he thought of it exactly like I did. I was very torn. At first, I was thinking 78. Then I thought 76 because it sounded like bouncy, like it was kind of a bouncy, like youthful Franklin. So I thought that might be earlier. But then then Jerry's after the verse and the chorus there, Jerry's guitar comes in, and that's when I knew it was 77. It was really just super confident. 76 became confident and became steady, but 77 they were just rolling, and you could hear that in his playing.
Beautiful. Thanks, Brett. Deech, 76.
Yeah, I mean, the Jerry had this way about his vocals. A lot of times he would kind of do a double, like he'd lose it way, like he did this kind of double thing. And it was always in 76 that he did that. At 77, he was more clean and very kind of cleaned up and pristine. But 76, he had this kind of almost like he lost his breath and he wanted to say it again or something like that. So I heard that. And I guess I wasn't focusing enough on the guitar, which you guys spot on exactly. Like the guitar was gave it away for you guys. You got a really good ear. I was going between the 78 and the 76, and I almost said 77, but 76, it just sounded like 76 to me.
Tricky. Also very observant of you. How did you get into the Dead?
Just growing up with a lot of people. Obviously, if I grew up in Woodstock, around lots of folks that were involved in that type of scene. My best friend growing up was Eli Danko. So, like Rick Danko's son, Nick Mason would just pop into the house. I'd be hanging out at Rick's house. I was just kind of born into it. My first show was in 1986 Buffalo. That's all we did growing up in high school, was just go see the Grateful Dead all the time. So maybe about 120, 130 Dead shows with Jerry. And it was just what we did. We were born to see them. Who are these people and why are they following us around?
Deech, what's the general vibe around Woodstock? Is it like a tourist destination now for people who just want to come and check out the farm?
Well, honestly, I haven't lived up there since 2001, so I'm not too sure. I go up to visit friends, but yeah, it's always going to be a touristy place. It's not going to be ever really built up. There's a lot of rules about that. They want to keep it kind of historic. But yes, it's funny because I actually, growing up there, we'd be playing hacky sack on the village green, and there'd be like tourists coming around with Jersey plates, and we'd be like, these Jersey people, go home. And now I live in Jersey. So it's pretty funny. And it's not Bethel. Bethel's where the Woodstock Festival happened. That's about an hour and 15 north of Woodstock. And then people would come and they'd circle around the village green and be like, hey, is this where Woodstock happened? Can you point us in the direction of where the field is? And I'm like, you got to drive an hour north. But yeah, it's pretty touristy place, and also still lots of hippies, and it's pretty quaint place. You should get up there if you can. It's really nice.
Do you think the Dead's Woodstock set is as mediocre as everyone else, or does it have a special place in your heart?
No, it was pretty awful. But it was also very late, and they were getting electrocuted, and there was a lot of other things happening. But yeah, it was pretty bad.
Real pleasure hanging. Thank you for coming on.
All right, we'll see you guys. Good luck.
Brett and Jacob are on to the finals. Whoever is closest over 3 tracks in aggregate wins the JyArz prize pack. Let's hear Ed's first pick of the finals. Guesses are in. It was I Know You Rider at Mississippi River Festival in Edwardsville, Illinois on August 16th, 1980. That was recorded by Joni Walker and transferred by Charlie Miller. Ed, just that, kind of drop in I Know You Rider. Why did you choose that one, and why did you want to highlight that portion, the most fun portion of the song?
Well, it is the most fun portion of the song. I thought also it might be a little bit tricky because I don't know if Jerry actually was that enthusiastic, I guess, in the earlier versions. So this is one of the earlier versions, and he really, got into it, like he did in the mid to late '80s. This was a 31 Days of Dead pick from 2015. As you said, it's the Mississippi River Festival, and it took place in, just torrential rain and howling winds and blasts of lightning. So it kind of added to the energy of the whole performance.
So Jacob got it exactly 1980. Brett guessed 81, so Jacob takes the early lead. Nice pull, Jacob. Why 80?
Man, honestly, I was going back and forth between like 80 to 82, but Brent's keys were, plinky. So that's why I was thinking that era. But then it really reminded me of the Friend of the Devil solo from Dead Set that was recorded in October 1980. That's like my favorite Friend of the Devil all time. And it just sounded really similar. So I don't know exactly the evolution of the plinkiness per se, but because it reminded me of that, I was like, well, let's just go with that.
Being a keyboard player, I think what he was using was a Rhodes there.
Interesting. Great logic, Jacob. Brett, 81.
Same thing. Yeah, it was great by Jacob there. That's the plinky keys. That's definitely what I was thinking. Was also between 80 and 82. I was also listening to Jerry's voice. It was very smooth. 80 doesn't surprise me.
Great. Before we go on to the second song in the finals, Ed, you said earlier that you were the go-to tape collector in your group, and I'm wondering how you rose to that position and also how you got into the Dead initially.
Well, Tim had said before when he was on that he got into the Dead first through tapes and then seeing them, and that was my path as well. My younger brother had seen the Dead in '85, and I knew about them, and I just started listening to them more and more, and I started, somebody made some tapes for me, and then I saw my first show in '86, and then I just wanted to hear as much as I could of the Dead. I've told this story on Instagram before. I put a really bad groveling tape trader ad in the old fanzine. The Golden Road was a fanzine that was ran in the '80s, and it was very groveling. And yeah, it was pathetic. And I got a postcard from Joni Walker. I didn't even know who she was at the time. It was a postcard from the post stamp from like the Berkeley biology department or something. And she said, I'd be happy to hook you up with some tapes. Just send me blanks and I'll hook you up. So I sent it to her, and a couple weeks later, I had like 10 or a dozen first generation soundboards, which I didn't realize what I had at the time. It wasn't until a little after that I really realized how amazing that gift was. And so I felt that I should do for others what she had done for me. So I was constantly making tapes for people, but because of her tapes, and I had such great quality tapes, those first generation soundboards, I was able to make really good connections. There was somebody who I connected with in Germany. There was somebody who I connected with in Ohio, and one or two other people. They were my main sources, and they had like soundboards, low generation soundboards, like just weeks or months after the show took place. So I had unbelievably good connections, and that enabled me, grow my collection and then share with others. And one of the places I shared the most was there was a radio show here in New York on WBAI, a listener supported station, and there was a Grateful Dead show they did Friday mornings. It started at 3:30 in the morning, and you could record. They would just play entire shows on that, and you could just record it on your cassette deck. And that's where I got some of my first tapes. And then when I started getting hooked up, I would donate those tapes to that show, and that's how they got circulated. It was also great because, again, this is a time before the internet, and I remember they would have people call in and give the set lists of shows, and I remember when somebody called in from Hampton after the Box of Rain bust out. And it was just, it's 3:30 in the morning. I just woke right up. It's amazing.
Wait, so when you get the soundboard and you make the first copy of the soundboard, I understand every generation of the tape is slightly worse. What percentage worse was that first copy of the soundboard versus the soundboard you got?
I don't know. As much as I enjoy those tapes, I don't know if I'm that much of a techie where I could tell that closely whether, one or two generations made that significant of a difference, at least to my ear. It probably does to somebody's ear, though.
That's pretty cool that your first reaction after getting these soundboards was to pay it forward. How groveling was that letter?
Well, you're only allowed so many words. So it was something to the effect of, bumming, have no tapes, something along those lines. I don't know, but it did the trick because it caught Joni Walker's attention. And I really wish I had the chance to thank her in person. I think I probably sent her a postcard back thanking her, but I really would have liked to have met her or thanked her in a more meaningful way in hindsight. And now that she's passed, I won't have the opportunity.
So Joni was a taper?
As I understand it, she was a taper, and then she became friendly with Dan Healy, and he allowed her to patch into the boards. So I don't exactly know. Probably somebody else, would be able to answer that better than me. But I can tell you, she sent me those tapes at a time. I was having a pretty tough time in my life personally, and those tapes really lifted my spirits. So it really went a long way, and she helped me more than she possibly could have known during that time.
Thank you, Ed. Jacob's up by 1. Let's hear Ed's second pick of the 3-song finals. The guesses are in half step at Holliday Memorial Stadium in Rochester, New York on September 1st, 1979. Ed, why that section and why only that section?
Okay. Well, first, this also comes from the first year that I did the 31 Days of Dead. So that was the year I picked a lot of stuff that I just had been in my wheelhouse and that I felt that I had to share and just get out and let people hear. We know that 77 is the bellwether year for amazing half steps. You have 5/7, 9/3, and 11/6, probably a few others in there too. And so that makes this, this version of half step from 79, in my opinion, a hidden gem and an underrated masterpiece. It's just so majestic, the ending, especially, the Rio Grande verses at the end kind of makes you feel about as good as humanly possible. That section I picked, Jerry just lands on this, what I call groovalicious melodic pattern and just brings it on home. And I just love it. That half step, that last part that you played, that's the version that's it,
Yeah, there was notably very faint keyboards from Brent there. You're a keyboardist, and you're in 2 Grateful Dead cover bands, the Funk Your Face band and Bear's Choice, and I'm wondering what your approach is in those bands on the keyboards.
Probably, first of all, I try and bring all of the keyboard players' influence into what I do on keyboards. Probably my most influential would be Keith and Brent. I think Keith in the early years, just, the barrel house playing, the honky tonk, I love it. And then Brent, was just such a powerful, soulful player, and he just owned the B3 organ. So the two of those guys are amazing. But, Hornsby is an amazing keyboard player too. from what I understand, he has a huge hand and he can stretch really far, and that's why he can sound so unique. So as much as I or anybody else may try to emulate some of the things he does, it's just he has his own sound. Pigpen's great. TC is great. Vince is great. Vince is, maligned, but some of the stuff, he's got great chops. If you listen to what he does, he also has some great chops. People malign Brent when he first joined the band too, because he's the new guy. And maybe people didn't necessarily like the sound he was getting out of his piano. I don't think anybody ever complained about his organ sound, but there are definitely complaints about how his piano, the sounds he got out of his synthesizer. And I guess one thing you have to understand, it was the 80s, and some of the electric pianos were not as developed as they are today. But I think when someone complains about Brent, I say, all you have to do is listen to Reckoning and the keyboard playing that he did on the acoustic piano, and it's just unstoppable.
In your bands, you guys play in the Connecticut area?
Yes. So Bear's Choice was the first band I was in. Things got a little bit slower with that band after COVID, so we haven't been as active. We played mostly in New York, in Manhattan and Westchester area. Phunk Your Face is a splinter band from Bear's Choice. A couple of the guys that were in Bear's Choice moved to Connecticut and started another band and asked me to join as a one-off, and that turned into more of a full-time position. So so we're playing mostly in Connecticut there.
Well, the links to those will be in the show notes. Jacob got it exactly, 79. Brett guessed 81. Jacob 2 for 2 in the finals. Tell us about that 79 poll, Jacob.
Honestly, man, kind of shocked about that one. I heard the two drummers pretty clearly, and they sounded kind of big, so that kind of, put me a little bit somewhere. But the keys really threw me off. I was really going back and forth between Brent and Keith. And so since, I knew the transition between the two was 79, I figured I'd split the diff and just go with 79. That was kind of a shot in the dark, honestly. That was a luck one.
Hey, playing the game, and it totally worked out. Nice.
Yeah,
nice
man,
job.
playing the game.
Brett, 81.
Yeah, just heard those plinky keys again. I didn't want to guess 80 because I figured it probably wasn't 80. I mean, there seem to be very few people that are evil enough to do the same year. Very few. So Ed didn't seem like that kind of guy. So, and I was right. Just the other way versus going to 79.
Playing the curator. I never, that's part of playing the game. That's why you've done so well, Brett. Playing
Thanks.
The curator. Very smart. Brett has 3 points. Jacob is 0. The idea is to be low as possible. Before we go on to the third and possibly final song in the finals, Jacob, now I'm really curious. How'd you get into the Dead?
I kind of got into them pretty similar to a lot of younger people my age that, obviously I wasn't born when they were around. I was born in 97. So, definitely didn't have any chance to see them. Growing up, I was really into like Lil Wayne and stuff in middle school, but my older brother, thank God, was into like a lot of hardcore and like ska punk and reggae and like cool stuff like that. So he kind of started putting me onto some cool stuff. And then eventually in high school, I found 2 huge boxes of my dad's records and, immediately decided to get a record player, started diving in. And the first one that I put on was Dark Side of the Moon because I had recognized the cover, but I never actually listened or knew anything about Pink Floyd. And what really like amazed me was the way that the songs flowed into each other and that like they designed it to be like that. And so that kind of opened up my eyes just to like classic rock in general. And then I went to college and had some buddies that were into the Dead, and I'd listened a little bit and was like, oh, this is cool, but like didn't quite get it. In my senior year, I needed to cram for like 3 exams that I had in the same week, like my final semester. And my buddy gave me a really long playlist of Dead music that he had curated. And he told me to listen to them in order because he curated them, for songs that transition into each other, etc. But I didn't listen. I put it on shuffle and I was listening to, I don't remember the show, but it was Help Slip that was supposed to go into a Franklin's Tower. And it was building up to the transition to Franklin's Tower and then just switched to like Cassidy or something out of nowhere. And it felt like a sneeze that you didn't actually sneeze. Like it was the most unsatisfying feeling that I've ever had. And I was like, what is going on? Like, what the hell just happened? And so I put it on in order and started listening through. And then there was another point where it went from Sugar Magnolia into something and then back into Sunshine Daydream. And I just kind of was blown away. And it reminded me of that feeling I had the first time I listened to Dark Side of Moon, where I was just really amazed by the transitions and stuff, you know? So that kind of opened me up to the Dead. And then what really sold me is I saw it was a Jerry birthday festival in Nashville. It was put on by the members of Future Birds. I don't know if y'all are familiar with them, but they were bringing in a bunch of cool Nashville musicians, playing 2 nights of Dead music. And I went and saw them with a buddy, and it was like the act of actually seeing Dead music being played live. Like, even though it wasn't, you know, the boys actually, but just seeing the music live, seeing the way the musicians communicated with each other, fed off each other, all of that kind of really just brought it all home. And that kind of, you know, I've been on the bus ever since, just absolutely obsessed. You know, no going back.
Jacob, you seem to have a great ear. Are you a musician?
I've been trying to teach myself some instruments for the past few years. So I've been playing the drums for about 5 years, which was going pretty well. I had some roommates that played guitar, so we got to jam a lot. And that's where I really started to kind of pick it up and really feel like I was improving. But I moved into an apartment last year, and I didn't want my neighbors to hate me. So I sold the drums. And just recently, a few months ago, I bought a bass and I've been trying to learn that. And that was going pretty well. But then I got into writing my thesis to defend my master's a few months ago. And so that kind of just flew out the window for a little bit. But now that I've finished that up and moved and, you know, kind of settling into a job and don't really have much to do at night, I've been playing a lot more. And that's been really fun.
Ed, what's the secret for keeping it going? Join a band?
That does help. I actually, you know, I started out playing the drum. Well, I guess I was playing the piano. That was my earliest instrument, but then I started playing the drums after that. And I was in high school, I played drums in bands, and that was fun. But my brother also played the drums. And when it came to college, we shared one set. So I was like, you take the set and I'll keep playing the piano. And he was always in bands, and I just kind of played, you know, myself. I don't know how to read music. I play entirely by ear. So I would sit there with a tape recorder and just kind of like press the rewind button and kind of work it out until I finally got it. And that's how I learned all the Dead songs. And then eventually my brother, who was in all these bands, he's like, you know, you should really get out there and play. And so it really wasn't until I was in my 30s that I started playing out and playing in bands. And that's really fun to collaborate and play with other people. So yeah, I guess my recommendation to Jacob would just keep playing, you know, get a routine, but always keep it fun. You know, it's got to be fun. So,
Jacob, can you read music?
I did take piano for a few years when I was young, but for some reason I just didn't stick with it. So I do remember how to read a little bit, but not that much. Like, if you put something in front of me right now, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. I'd have to Google it, and then I could probably pull it together after that. So what I've mainly been doing to try and learn is trying to learn, you know, the notes on the fretboard and learn scales, and then just pull up, like, on YouTube, like, bassless backing tracks that are in a certain key or on a certain scale, and just kind of jam around on those and just kind of try and learn different areas and, you know, work on finger dexterity and stuff. Occasionally I'll look up some tabs if I want to, you know, try and learn a song a little bit, but I want to get beyond that. I want to get to, you know, kind of what you were saying, Ed, where you can hear what they're playing and just kind of know where to go around that and
yeah,
lock it.
at the end of the day, it's more of a feeling than, you know, trying to read music. So, I mean, you do need to read a little bit. You need to know something, but sometimes people get really boxed in by that and don't have the ability to jam. To me, that's the beauty of music, to be freeform and to jam. And being in a Dead band is the best, because a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, how do you do that? It's like, well, being in a Dead band is the best because the Dead made so many mistakes. It's so forgiving. So if you make a mistake, who cares? You just take as many chances as possible, because chances are there's going to be more good stuff than bad stuff.
So not reading music started out as the default, but now do you rely on it as an aid for your creativity at the piano? I'm not sure if that made sense.
No, it's a good question. So at some point in time in the 90s, I felt like I had plateaued. And so I said, you know, maybe I should take lessons. So I found a guy. I went to a music school, and they all different type of musicians, all different teachers. And I was like, let me have the jazz guy, because I knew that guy was improvisational. And he's like, just first day, he's like, just play something for me. So I played something, and he sat there and closed his eyes and listened to everything. He's like, that's beautiful. He's like, do you read? And I said, no. And he said, you got to read, man. He's like, he's like, you don't have the whole package unless you can read. So he said, we're gonna teach you to read. And again, I was in my 30s, and so we did like flashcards and stuff like that. I was too old for that stuff by that time. I just, it was too hard to do flashcards, and also I knew so much music to like, do like row your boat and try and read that. Like I could just figure it out by ear, and so my ear was almost crippling me from learning how to read. So at that point in time, I just said forget about it, and I just resigned myself to the fact that I'm just always going to have to play by ear.
Great answer. Appreciate it. Okay. Third song. Brett has 3 points. Jacob has 0. The idea is to be as low as possible. Ed has another pick. Last song of the finals, possibly. What am I becoming? WWE voice over here. The guesses are in. Althea at Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center in Oakland, California on December 30th, 1986. Ed, that was a really nice Althea. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's not a year that's really known for Althea, 1986. So this is another 31 Days of Dead pick from the 2011 series. This Althea is the second song of the show. Kind of an unusual placement of it, which kind of indicates to me that the band was really, psyched to play it that night, and they crushed it. They did a great performance. To me, on this version, there's great interplay between Garcia and Weir. I love the reverb that Jerry gets on his guitar, and the big fat sound that Bobby gets. I mean, it almost sounds like it's like a giant rainbow-hued, happy, soapy bubble. It's great what the two of them are doing. And then, Jerry he builds it like he usually does. He's a master at doing that, and just ends it with some fanning. It's just a great Althea. Like I said, in an unexpected year for Althea.
Okay. Brett guessed 85. Jacob guessed 1990. So we're tied. Overtime. Brett, you were closer. You guessed 85. Tell us about it.
I was going to go something like what Jacob guessed there until I heard the very faint keys. God, the keys were really faint in there, but I could hear them barely. I mean, there was just big Bobby guitar, and that's what I associate. I mean, 1990 is a perfectly logical guess there. And I heard the keys there, and I'm like, that's not 90 keys there at all. So that's why I went more with the mid 80s, because I kind of combined that with the bigger sound.
What a clutch save when you needed it most. Wow.
Yeah, that was very perceptive. It's good.
Yeah.
And Jacob, 90.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was really good to pull those keys out, because I didn't hear them really out like throughout the whole thing, and then barely kind of heard them, but couldn't really make out what it was. So what I was really hearing was like the really big, like fat toms that Mickey was playing there, those big fills. And I just kind of, always associate that with like 89, 90. and you know, maybe even a little later. So I wasn't exactly sure since I couldn't really hear the keys and wasn't sure if I was playing tricks on myself trying to find them, you know, when I did hear that little bit. So I just kind of, yeah, went off the drums for 90.
Really fun pick. All right, who's ever closest on this next song wins. All right, the other one. At Meadowlands Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey on April 1st, 1988. A very nice one, Ed. Tell us about it.
So, well, this is actually from Road Trips 4.2. I attended this show, actually the whole run at the Meadowlands in 88. This was the final night. Pretty standard set list on paper. At least the second set was. First set had some surprises to it. And, you know, you don't think of the other one that much. It's kind of a throwaway song in the later years. Nothing like it was in 72, 73. But this one really stuck out for me. Particularly that segment that you just played. You know, it's a swirling rager with warpy effects, and the danger feels painstakingly real.
It does. I felt like I was being like flushed down a toilet or something. Whoa! Like, you seem to enjoy setlist construction, Ed.
I do. It goes back to my tape trader days, and you know, when I'd go to a show, my brother and I would always be, you know, trying to construct set lists we thought that would be played that day and fantasize about what might be played. And then when I would make curate my own playlists, I would do that as well. And being a musician kind of helps because I know like what songs can segue into other songs. You know, if it ends on one key and another song starts on another key. For example, Shakedown Street is in D minor, and then it'll usually end on the key of G. And a lot of times the Dead would start up Bertha, which starts in the key of G. So that's, you know, the connection between those two songs. And there's several songs that are like that. Mississippi Half Step, which we heard tonight, ends in the key of A, and Franklin's Tower, sometimes they would do half step Franklin's Tower. That begins in the key of A. So there's these logical sequences that the band would do, and I would curate my set lists using that and then try and create things that the band never did. You know, I always had fun doing that.
So what do you do if you just really, really want to blend two songs that are not in the same key?
Then you got to get out there. You kind of have to do what the Dead did on 4/2/73 with Here Comes Sunshine, and just bring it, just completely deconstruct it, and then go into Bobby McGee.
You just give up. That's funny. I feel like the Dead did that a lot. Yeah, you just hear them melt into like nothingness and just try to figure out like, so what now?
It was always better when they did that than when they did something as formulaic. I mean, the formulaic is fun, but it was always more adventurous. The old without a net type thing, just kind of take a chance and see where it goes.
But if you want your rebelling against the structure to pack some punch, you usually have to adhere to it, right?
100%, yes. The yin and the yang.
Okay. Jacob guessed 92. Brett guessed 90. Brett is the 4-time champ. Epic comeback there, Brett. The down 3 at the last song comebacks have just never happened. Tell us about your 90 guess.
I tell you, Jacob, you are incredible. First of all, that's why I give you kudos before I give that answer.
You guys both were great. I mean, those were not easy picks that I gave. So you guys were fantastic.
Yeah. Oh my God. I didn't think there was anybody else out there like me that was about my age. So really, honestly, like it's awesome to see it.
Well, that's the cool thing about the show, man.
Yeah.
It lets us know we're not entirely crazy.
Oh my gosh. Exactly. Exactly. That is 100% on point. 1990, I guess that because I heard a big sound. I heard late Brent Keys in there, and it just sort of all these like we were talking about after it ended, trippy sounds. Just it felt like they were coming out of space to it. I've heard the show that 4188. Been a while, but that is a great show, obviously, and so I'm happy to be winning again.
Jacob, incredible run, as Brett said, and nailing that 70, 80, and 79 back-to-back was pretty epic. What'd you hear there?
Yeah, for me, first off, good job, Brett. Kudos to you. I folded like a lawn chair on that one.
Thank you, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just really thrown off by the craziness of the synths. I couldn't tell if that was just one or if it was two, and I thought maybe this is Vince and Bruce throwing it down. I mean, I don't listen to the 90s a ton, so I wouldn't know for sure, like, kind of what sounds they tended to create when they played together. So I was close to going a little bit earlier just to kind of split the difference, but my gut was saying maybe a little more middle. So yeah, threw it out there.
Well, congrats, Jacob.
It was
Great
a good
run.
call.
Yeah, thanks.
And Ed, beautiful picks, beautiful analysis.
I can't tell you how much fun this was. This is almost as fun as seeing my Instagram account. And I really enjoyed meeting all of you.
Likewise. You seem like someone who curates 31 Days of Dead times 2 every year. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the kind words. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Ed, I just want to say also, like, I absolutely love the page. I've learned tons of incredible shows, and I really love the descriptions that you put into everything. I think it was a couple weeks ago, you did a February 9th, 73 El Paso, where Jerry just goes absolutely crazy on the intro. I had never heard that one, and it just threw me for a loop.
Do you know, awesome. I almost used that track for tonight.
Wow.
I would have gotten that one.
Not only would you have gotten the year, you would have gotten the day.
Extra points.
Yep.
That is so incredible. I love that El Paso intro. It's amazing.
Yeah, man, it's crazy.
But thank you. I appreciate the kind words. DM me. All right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll do.
Thanks so much for listening, and thanks again to Ed for curating. The links to 31 Days of Dead and his tribute bands, Phunk Your Face and Bear's Choice, are both in the show notes, as is the link to JyArz. Thank you again to JyArz for sponsoring this week's prize pack. Great company, small business, really love JyArz. Thank you again. Shout out to Ashwin and Little Hickory's Downtown Hug Champions, a local Providence band. Check them out if you live in Providence. They are a Grateful Dead tribute band. And again, shout out Ashwin. Also, if you wouldn't mind, please take a moment and give the podcast 5 stars. I know it's annoying, but if you could do that, and if you're on Apple, write a review saying something nice. I would really appreciate it. It helps get the word out. Thank you so much. For all the show links, including our YouTube channel, go to guesttheyear.net. If you want to be a contestant on the show, sponsor the show, or make comments and ask questions, email us at info@guesttheyear.net. Shout out to Dylan for drawing the poster, and James and Jack for helping out behind the scenes. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to the amazing tapers whose recordings made this show possible. Congrats to Brett on the 4-peat. Truly, truly impressive. And to other contestants, thanks for playing. And remember, it's all one song anyway.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night. And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.